All right, beginner web stuff. So this is going to be kind of just the front end of a website. We're not going to do, at least in these couple of videos, any interactivity. We might add some of that in the future, but this is just going to be making the front end of a website. How to use HTML and CSS. We use some flexbox, and we're going to make a little just the front page of a website from which you can then go and add content and stuff, and basically kind of set up the framework for a larger website. There's going to be two videos. First video, we're just going to go in, set up the structure, get the organization, talk about file systems, and then in a second video, we'll talk about styling it, because CSS, there's going to be more CSS than there is HTML actually in this. So setting this up, you will need some sort of text editor. I like Atom for this particular purpose. You can get it at atom.io. It's a GitHub thing. You'll also, if you're doing any type of web thing, you're going to need W3 Schools, especially if you're just starting out. W3 Schools is the #1 resource. They have all these interactive tutorials, and anything that you could ever possibly want to know about web design is right there. And this is, if you think about it, one of the easiest things to learn in the world, because all the resources that you could ever possibly want are here, and they're free. So there's that, and what else do we need? Oh, you need a browser. And for this, I'm going to be using Firefox. I like the way the development tools work in Firefox. You can use something else if you like, but if you want to follow along with this, Firefox is recommended. It's free. You can get that as well. It's another reason that web design is nice and easy to get into. You don't have to pay anything for the software. It's not like you have to pay $50 a month for Photoshop or anything like that. I've also downloaded some images here and put them in a little folder. These I got from pexels.com. I just downloaded kind of an assortment of images. I don't know that I'm going to be using all of them in this video, but I plan to use them in some later videos. But you'll probably want some kind of images, at least one to follow along with. And that's it. You'll need your computer. So let's start this. With any website, you have to move away from thinking of what you're creating as creating a file in a software program, because what you're actually going to be creating is a whole bunch of files, and you're going to need to keep those together and keep them organized. And for that, you're going to want to start by creating a folder structure. So I'm just going to right click and go to new, create a new folder for this. We'll call it site. And what I typically like to do, yeah, I've already got one here, so we'll call this site demo. So let's make a new site demo. What I like to do is create backup folders within this, so root folders that, if need be, I can duplicate and continue my work. So as you kind of work through, you might create branches where maybe you do something a little bit different in one or different in the other. So I'm going to start this with a new root folder. And what goes into this root, this is version 1, what goes into this root folder is everything that's going to go onto your web server when you ultimately upload this to a website. So root version 1, we're going to open this up. There's nothing in here yet, and we're going to go ahead and start moving some of these things in. I've got some text. Basically, this is just lorem ipsum text that I put into a text document. I'll go ahead and move that in there. I'll put my images in there. And that's pretty much it. I don't need this Atom icon. We can go ahead and delete that guy. All right, so this is going to be the site that we work on. I'm going to go ahead and launch Atom. And when Atom opens up, it's going to ask us a bunch of questions and open all this stuff. We're just going to close this for now until we've got down to this untitled file. I'm not going to add anything to this yet. We're just going to go ahead and save some of these out. So I'm going to go ahead and File, Save As. We want to put this into our desktop site demo root v1. Make sure to name this index.html and keep that all lowercase. Case matters. Case matters a lot when you get into naming things and linking things together. So you always want to be careful that you're putting the same case in the correct case, and that you have the right file names too. So when you don't have an HTML file name, Atom won't recognize that it's an HTML file and won't give you the proper code hinting. So we're going to save that. We got our index.html file here. We've got our text. Next, what I'm going to do is create a new folder in here. give it a new folder and just call this CSS. Just keeping that lowercase. And in Atom, you can see that Atom's actually added this project folder, and this is a super handy thing that it does, is keep all of your stuff organized for you, so we can see all of our images in here. We can open them up as tabs. We can dock them to different sides, which is super handy. And as we create folders, we'll see these folders show up in here. What I'm going to do is create a new file, and we'll call this CSS when we save it. So we'll file, save as, put this into that CSS folder. I'm just going to name this style.css. Again, I'm keeping everything lowercase because it's easier to remember that later. So we've got our index.html and our style.css. Next, we need to start linking some of this stuff together. So in my index.html, I need some basic HTML code that's going to start the framework of our document. A nice thing about Atom is that it actually fills all this stuff in for us. So if I just type in HTML and press enter, it'll actually type in all of the basic things that we need for an HTML document. Our doc type declaration at the top, our HTML tag, our head tag, additional tags inside the head tag, which are currently empty. Like the title tag, we'll go ahead and call this Fancy Restaurant Home. And then the body tag. When we look at the structure, what goes in the head is kind of like the machine readable stuff. It's everything that needs to be read and parsed out before the browser displays anything to the user. So you're not going to put anything in there that nothing's going to go into the head that people are actually going to see. That stuff is not going to actually get shown to your user, with the exception of the title right here. The title will display to the user in the tab right up here at the top. That's really the only thing in the head that's going to show up to the user. All the stuff that's going to show up and be rendered for the user is going to go in the body tag. While we're working on this, I'm going to go ahead and add some links for our fonts. So I'm going to go to Google Fonts here and add some fonts. If you're going to use something other than the kind of handful of web-safe fonts, which are not particularly attractive, you'll want to use something like Google Fonts or Typekit or some other web-hosted font. What this does is it allows you to use any of these on your website. Otherwise, you're going to be limited to a handful of like 8 different fonts that you've pretty much seen them all. It's like Arial and Comic Sans and Trebuchet and just really kind of fonts. So we don't want to use those. So I've got a couple that I've already picked out here that I'm going to be using. So Arvo I'm going to be using for my headers, and Source Sans I'm going to be using for the rest. So you click the little plus sign, it'll add it to your basket. This little gray bar down here will show the fonts that you've selected. Before we go to embed it, we need to tweak this a little bit. So for my fonts, first for Arvo, I'm going to go ahead and take regular and a bold. And then for my Source Sans Pro, I'm actually going to take light italic, and a bold. So we want kind of a selection of fonts. In case there's something that we want to display in bold font, we'll want to have a font for that. If we want to use italics, we'll need a font for that, etc. I don't want to bother with everything, because if we add too many of these, it'll slow down our load time. So I'm just going to take the ones that I plan to use, which is going to be 3 of these kind of paragraph readable fonts, and then 2 of these header fonts, so that we have nice typographic hierarchy. So let's go back to embed. To get this to work, we'll need to link this in our HTML, and we'll need to use, in CSS, we'll be using these to call those fonts. So for now, I'm just going to copy this. We'll go ahead and leave Google Fonts open for now and come back to it later. In your HTML and in your CSS, it's always a good idea to comment things so that people know what you're doing. So link to Google Fonts. So your comments are this kind of syntax here, where you start with a left arrow and then a exclamation point, 2 dashes. Anything inside that then becomes a comment, and then once you end it here, the browser will not parse that out. This can be really handy for kind of if you're testing things and you're not sure if maybe one piece of code in your HTML is causing a problem. Instead of deleting it, you can just put comment tags around it and then see if that fixes the issue. So I'll paste in this. Now you'll see it's kind of jumped over to the right. What I'll do here Let's go to view, and we're going to set soft wrap. Just collapse this. That way it'll break these two new lines for us. What we're also going to need to do is we're going to need to link our CSS. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. Comment this in. And then after that, I'm just going to type in link, and it will help us with the syntax here. So link, enter, style sheet, and it's tried here. It hasn't gotten quite the right path, but it's tried. With tags in HTML, there's a typical syntax is that you'll have an opening tag like this, and then a closing tag like this with a /. So same thing, just a /, and everything inside that tag then becomes part of that, or becomes children of that. With the link, this is what's called a self-closing tag, and it doesn't need a closing tag. With this, there's nothing that's going to be displayed. It's just linking some stuff with attributes that are attached to the head tag, the opening tag. Anytime that you want to have an attribute applied to it, you want to put that as part of the opening tag. So if I wanted some attribute on this head tag, for instance, I would add that with the structure of attribute equals, and then in quotes, put whatever the attribute should be. I don't need to add an attribute there. So the nice thing with this, though, is that it does help us a lot with that syntax. So Adam is helping out here. Let's go ahead and look at where our CSS file is, and that'll help us know where we need to send this to look for the CSS file. So we look inside this folder. Our HTML file is here, and these links are relative, so you can kind of think of it like the index file is looking for a CSS file. And right now we need to tell it to look in the CSS folder, and then we'll find our style.css. So we need to tell it, it's looking at the CSS folder. We're going to take off that / there. And then instead of master, I'm just going to change this to style.css. Save it. And just to test that this is working, I'm going to go ahead and open this with Firefox. And we have nothing in here yet, but what we can do is right-click, inspect element. We can see and kind of expand out all the stuff that we've written so far. We can see that our fonts are there. We can see that we've got the link to our CSS. And if we go over to Style Editor, we should see the style CSS show up. If you don't see that, that means the link is not working. So you need to check the syntax of that and check that it's going to the right place, that you have the right caps and all that stuff. Whenever a link is not working, always check that your caps and your name and all that stuff is right before you start looking at other things. So we've got CSS / style and CSS. All right, so we're going to start moving a little bit faster with this. We've got the core, kind of the basic part of this setup. So now I'm going to go ahead and start setting up the rest of this. So at the very top, we're going to have a nav bar. So there is an HTML element for a nav, and inside that nav bar, we're going to have an unordered list. Actually, we're going to have a span tag first. We're going to put our title of our restaurant in there. We're going to call this. If you wanted to put an image in here, you could put an image instead. So I'm going to use this word mark Fancy Restaurant as my logo, but if you had an image logo, you could put an image tag in there. But we're just going to leave the span. I'm going to go ahead and put the unordered list. That's going to be where I put my navigation for my links. And here we'll put some li tags. And inside that li, I'm going to put an anchor tag. So you can see this speeds things up a lot because it's typed out a lot of stuff for us. I essentially typed nav, enter, span, enter, ul, enter, li, enter, a, enter, and then it's added all the rest of this for us. So anchor tags are the lifeblood of the internet. This is how things link from one page to another. This is how your navigation is going to link from one HTML file to another. So anchor tags link to something with the href attribute, and they display something in between their opening and closing tags. So we have an opening anchor tag and a closing anchor tag with our attribute here. So I'm going to have this just link back to our home page, which is this page that we're currently working on, and then it's going to link to index.html, but it's going to display home on the site when we go to click it. So I save this, go over to my web browser and reload. So Control R to reload. We can now see that it's added this home. That we've also got our fancy restaurant in the span. Perfect. So let's go ahead and duplicate this a little bit. We're going to Control C, Just press enter, Control V, Control V, Control V. Paste these in. So this is going to be to the menu for our restaurant. This is going to be the location of the restaurant, and then we're also going to have one for contact for the restaurant. And then over here for what we're going to display, I'm going to say menu, but I'm going to go ahead and capitalize it properly. I have location, also capitalized, and contact, also capitalized. So these files don't exist yet. Menu, location, contact.html. We will create those at the end once we've kind of put our HTML together and we've got the framework ready. We'll just copy that out to a bunch of files and then change the names on them. But for now, this is when we click on menu, it's going to link to menu.html, and when we click on location, it's going to link to location.html. We can save this, go ahead and reload it and check that it's working. So right now we're on the home page, and we can see up here it's currently on index.html. If I click menu, it's going to say file not found. There was no menu.html because in our folder we don't have a menu.html yet. So we'll create that later. Once we've created the structure, then we can duplicate it, and that will speed things up for us rather than having to keep writing this stuff over and over again. All right, so there's our nav. Let's go ahead and put in a header. And this type of header is going to be pretty simple. I'm going to have an h1 element. So an h1 is a header, like a title. H1 is just really, really big text. That's the biggest text, and it's kind of automatically formatted to be really, really large, and also have some margins and padding and stuff. So in there, we're going to put in, being super creative with these titles. Actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and, it doesn't make sense to put our title again. I'm going to go ahead and open up my text box full of lorem ipsum text. We'll take this one. We'll just replace that with lorem ipsum. I'm going to add, let's go ahead and do like an H2 or maybe an H3. Let's do an H3. And so H2, sometimes I'll save that for other smaller things. Essentially, it starts with H1 is biggest, H2 is a little smaller, H3 is a little smaller. And you can use these headers to help create your font hierarchy, typographic hierarchy. So we'll go ahead and put this in our H3 tag. Perfect. All right, so next, let's go ahead and add some content. Now, there isn't a content tag. There's like there's just no tag that's specifically for content. So we're going to use a div. And divs are huge. And actually, divs were kind of what you would use for everything before these specific tags started popping up, like span and or like nav and header and footer. So div tags, what you typically do is set a div, and then you give it a class and or an ID. I'm going to set the class here as content. And when we go to call it in CSS, there'll be a little bit of difference. Instead of just typing in header, we'll put in dot content. So header, we'll just call by typing header, but this one will be dot content. If you're using an ID, you would use a hashtag ID. And there's some differences between classes and IDs. ID equals, let's go ahead and add, same thing for the ID. An ID can only be used once per document, so I can't ever use content again for any other element in this document, whereas classes can be used multiple times, and any style that gets applied to this class gets applied to all of those classes, so that can save time. The advantage of IDs is that if you had one long page and you wanted to link to different parts of that page in your navigation instead of changing from one document to another, this would let you jump to different IDs with your anchors, but that's more advanced stuff. So we're gonna just kind of pass by that. We'll go ahead and stick it in there. I'm going to put in some paragraphs in here. So paragraph tag, let's grab some of this, I guess. One of those paragraphs. We'll break it up with P. Let's actually, while we're doing this, let's go ahead and just add all of the P tags that we're going to need. So paragraph, and in here, let's go ahead and grab some of this stuff. It's good to use this lorem ipsum because it looks like real text even if you haven't gotten actual copy yet. If you're working with copy, typically you'll have like a copywriter or somebody who's writing that for you, and you don't have to go through and do all of the editing and stuff yourself, but you might also be editing this stuff yourself too, and hopefully getting paid for it. Always make sure to specify that in a contract, that if you're doing copy editing and graphic design, specify that stuff out, so you're not just signing on thinking you're going to be doing coding and then end up doing all this extra work too. So next, we've got our content area, and then finally we're going to do our footer. And in the footer, let's tab this over. I like to keep these all kind of in line just to visually help see which part is a child of which other part. Let us span. And then here we're going to put our copyright notice. Now for copyright symbols and some other symbols, they might not show up correctly. And if you go and look it up, you can actually find it probably on W3 Schools here or just online somewhere. It'll tell you kind of some different things that you can use for this. So there's HTML symbols. It'll tell you the code that you can use, and then also some different other codes for other things. What we want here is not listed, or it's probably listed in here somewhere, but what we want is actually the copyright symbol. So we're going to put ampersand copy, and then we'll put 2019 Fancy Restaurant. So there's our copyright notice, and then we'll go ahead and put the links from up here again, so that we've got our navigation in a couple places. Problem, I'm going to save this out and then reload it over here, is that now, so we've got all of our text and stuff, but these are still displaying as like a list, and we actually want them to just display inline. So instead of displaying these as like list items, and also list items shouldn't exist outside of an unordered or ordered list, we're going to go ahead and remove those. And to do that quickly, we're going to use the find replace. So go ahead and select them first, actually. Make sure you have those selected. I'm going to make sure to select this to only in selection, and I'm going to look for anything with the right bracket, li. Just going to find all those. I'm going to replace all with nothing. I'm going to do the same thing / li. So find all those. I'm going to replace all of them with nothing. And now we've just got our anchor tags, and they're just kind of floating around in there. I'm going to want to treat these as like a block of stuff, so I'm going to put these in a div tag. So we'll call this div footer links. And you can set a class name to whatever you want it to be. So I'm setting it to footer links with a capital L here for its middle part. Let's do Control X to cut those, and now I'm just going to put them inside that div tag. Now these are children of the div, which is a child of the footer. Let's save it. And now let's reload our page. And now we've got this very basic, very boring looking site with a typo here where it says Florum Ipsum instead of Lorem Ipsum. So we can go through and kind of check and make sure that stuff like that isn't a problem. And this is really, it's not particularly exciting. It doesn't look great, but this is really just the structure. Once you get the structure in, the HTML structure is pretty fast. Then you can go in and you can start tweaking things in CSS. And that's what we'll work on in the next video. Before we do that, though, we want to go ahead and start duplicating these out. Now that we have the basic structure, we can go ahead and start duplicating these out and adding some basic stuff to them. So I'm going to go here into Atom. Let's open up our little project manager window thing here again. I'm going to right click on index, and you can duplicate, or you can just press the D key. And we'll go ahead and name this menu. Make sure that these names match. Press enter to accept that. Make sure that these names, though, match the names that you've got in your links here. So we've got menu, lowercase, location.html, lowercase, contact.html, lowercase. So again, select it, press D, we'll call this location, press enter, select it, press D, we'll call this contact, press enter. So now we've got a bunch of files. We look in our folder here, in our root v1, we've got contact, index, location, menu. And we can start editing these a little bit and make them a little bit more clear when we actually go to look at them, what is supposed to be on each one. So on this contact page, I'm going to keep the div class content, but I'm just going to delete this stuff and put in a p tag, and we'll put in like contact for now. We'll put in a form here later. And save it. Location, actually we can go ahead and do our location. I'm going to go to Google Maps. If you want to include an interactive map, you can go to Google Maps and find a map of something. So we've got a map of Hong Kong here. I'm going to say that this is, our restaurant is going to be located in Admiralty. So in Admiralty train station is where our restaurant exists. I want to share this. I know it's all in Chinese. We're going to share this. We want to go to the embed. Trust me, this says embed if you speak English. And we're going to take this iframe, and then this says copy HTML, or you can just do Control-C to copy it. We're going to go into here and just paste this on our location. We're going to replace all that stuff in the content area with this little iframe. So we'll paste that iframe. Just do view toggle soft wrap so we can actually see this big long link of stuff. It's fine. We'll go ahead and save our location. Menu, I'm just going to put in, for now, we'll put in this little placeholder. Essentially, we'll be replacing these placeholders later on with full menu content. But for now, we'll just call it menu. And we will save it. So now we've got our different pages. There's a contact page, a location page, and our home page with all of its kind of like about us text. So let's go back over to our restaurant home. I'm going to reload this, Control R to reload, Command R if you're on a Mac. And now these links should work. They didn't before, but now when I click on menu, it should take us to the menu page, display that. We go to location. It'll display that little interactive map that we got from Google. And if I click contact, there we go. We should get to see that contact content that we've put in there. And then later on, all we need to do is replace that content with what we're going to be working on. Typically, you would have your content ready, but for the sake of speed, I'm just going to work on this home page for now. So next video, we will look at styling this and turning it into something pleasing to look at instead of this just white background with black serif text. All right, I will see you in the next video.